the next match is the main event. We're finally here. It's the WCW or the NWO World Title, however you thought of it at the time. Hogan is defending the belt against the Giant, and we know him today as the Big Show. We've kind of talked about the first time these guys met being Halloween Havoc 95 with the whole building and the Yeti. That's for another time. But let's briefly mention that the Giant was a heel there, but by August of 96, he's main eventing pay-per-views with Hogan, and this time he's a babyface as the answer to Hollywood Hogan. So on September 2nd, the Monday Nitro edition, the Giant runs out during a brawl and sides with the NWO, flip-flopping again and turning heel. Then he wins World War III, earning a title shot against Hogan, but of course, since he's in the NWO, he's not going to do that. After Starrcade, Piper comes out and tells fans they've seen his last match. The NWO doesn't want Hogan to not be able to get his revenge, so they beat him up, and they ask the Giant to choke slam him. The Giant refuses, so Hogan slaps him. Then the Giant grabs Hogan by the neck and demands his title match. Hogan agrees, but as soon as he's released, the NWO jumps on the Giant, kicking him out of the group. So kids, even back in 96, 97, the Big Show was turning left and right. Yeah, I'm sure we will talk about this a great deal another time and probably have multiple shows on the Giant. But whose idea was it for him to join the NWO? Would this have been something that Hogan pushed for because he liked working with him?
I think very much would have been, don't know. I think it would have been very much something that Hogan would have pushed for, because I think we all know, and I think you know, I don't know if we've discussed it, that Hogan was completely in charge of his character.
Right.
Completely in charge. And I think if you go back and take a look at where Hogan drew some great money was with Andre the Giant.
Sure.
In WrestleMania 3. So I think in trying to bring that back and trying to get an opponent for Hogan, I think this would have been something that Hogan would have wanted, and probably the booking committee would have said, okay, let's do it.
Well, before we get to the match, let's talk briefly about that January 13th edition of Monday Nitro again. This is the one we just mentioned with DDP at the Superdome in New Orleans. Well, this is 12 days prior to this NWO sold-out pay-per-view, and it's worth mentioning that WCW smashes the WWF in the ratings here, 3.4 to 2.3. But what's notable about this show is the entire time, Tony, you guys built up the Hogan Giant main event. And then right before you guys go off the air, that's when the match starts. Just a minute before Nitro goes off the air, the bell rings. And it turns out this was really just a ratings ploy for TNT to promote the debut of Robin Hood. And this was all done by design with lots of stalling to make it work like this. The actual match only goes about 3 minutes before the NWO interferes and gives Giant a DQ win. But what's critical here is that WCW starts advertising that Nitro fans should stay tuned because the match will be shown during the commercials of Robin Hood. But during the first commercial break, they just run commercials, no wrestling. So the second set of commercials, the second stop set, they do show 30 seconds of the match, and they pretended that this is still live in New Orleans, even though neither guy has broken a sweat. The third break in Robin Hood is all commercials again, but they do promise to show the conclusion of the match in the fourth commercial break. So during the fourth commercial break, we finally get 40 minutes into Robin Hood, and we see the conclusion of this match, a DQ. Tony, what the hell happened here? How did you hear about this idea? It feels like it would have been something TNT forced you guys to do. Who was for it? Who was against it? What was that negotiation look like?
I don't know about the negotiation, but I can tell you right now that we were all against it. And I'm sure Eric was against it as well. This, to me, encapsulates the core problem of WCW. And that was we were a part of Turner Broadcasting compared to Vince McMahon, which was Vince McMahon and the WWE. The people above Eric, with the exception of some, I know, didn't give a shit about wrestling.
Right.
Looked at wrestling, looked down their nose at wrestling. And, again, you're talking about smashing them in the ratings 3-4 to 2-3. They noticed that. So they wanted to try to piggyback on the success of wrestling as best they could. And if wrestling was going to suffer, so fucking be it. And wrestling suffered that night. And to me, there have been stories, and I know Eric has a podcast as well that I haven't listened to, but I'm sure he has told the story before. I don't know if he has, that he had a chance to do a lot of other great things, or other things could have been great, don't know, with WCW. But every time as we called them, the suits of Turner Broadcasting got involved in it, they fucked it up. And that's why I have no use for that company at all. The only use I have for that company is because Ted Turner was the founder of it, and he was ahead of his time. But I think a lot of our downfall was, and we can go through it, a lot of our downfall was because we were owned by that company, and because we did things the wrong way. To me, that just smacks of the crossroads of a company not giving a fuck about us and making us look like shit. And so that's what I think about that, without getting pretty upset about it. I'm starting to get real pissed off now.
The New Adventures of Robin Hood is the official title of the show. It ran 4 seasons on TNT. It was shot in France. The final episode, ironically, is called The Return of the Giant. I don't know why that gives me a tickle, but it does. Yeah,
you know what? You know what they always said about TNT, right? We know drama.
Yeah.
Bull fucking shit. Okay. Okay. You know how I know that they didn't know drama? Because they had the Untouchables movie on, the one with Kevin Costner. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And Sean Connery.
Yeah.
And you remember that there was the great scene to where the woman came in the train depot with the baby in the carriage. All right. And as she came in that great tense scene, as she came in with the baby carriage, and Kevin Costner looked at her, they went to a fucking commercial break.
Wow.
Okay. You don't know drama. Bullshit. Okay.
To recap this whole Robin Hood fiasco.
Now I'm pissed off, Conrad.
Well, everybody likes pissed off Tony. Right. WCW has falsely advertised this main event for hours. Mm-hmm. They've told people it would air during the commercials when it really didn't consistently. They only showed them 30 seconds at a time, and they pretended that Hogan and Giant went 45 minutes and that this was all live, even though neither guy ever broke a sweat. Now, Tony, you would be in the loop on this. Meltzer wrote that WCW and TNT were flooded with phone calls, letters, and faxes complaining about this. And WCW kind of baby-faced it off, saying that this was not the plan they were told of, and that TNT was supposed to air the entire match in the first 20 minutes of the show. Yeah. Do you remember there being a big backlash from fans over this?
I certainly do. And I also remember, and I think you have to realize this, that once we had sent them the match, I don't know if we sent the match in its entirety. That's something that Craig Leathers would know. Or if we sent the match
in pieces.
In pieces or whatever. We had no control over what they were going to air.
Right.
Or how they were going to air it. So here we got, again, TNT making a decision that impacts the company and also impacts the company that's making the biggest ratings for them. So, yeah, that was not a good moment for us.